The 1900 portrait looked ordinary until the background showed who actually took the picture. Afternoon sunlight came through the tall windows of the Charleston Heritage Museum, making long shadows on Dr. Maya Robinson's desk. She fixed her reading glasses and bent closer to her computer screen, studying the clear scan of a photograph that came that morning from an estate sale in the old part of town. At first, the picture seemed nothing special. It was a formal family portrait from 1900 of the Whitmore family, father, mother, and 3 children standing stiffly in their sitting room. The father had one hand resting on his wife's shoulder. The children stood in order from tallest to shortest. Their clothes showed they were wealthy, silk, lace, and well-made suits. The background had the usual signs of rich life back then: heavy curtains, fancy furniture, and a big decorative mirror hanging on the wall behind them. Maya had looked at hundreds of photos like this. As the museum's curator of Southern history, she spent her days sorting through the pictures that wealthy families left behind. Most showed the same thing: power, high position, and no sign of the people who helped make their comfortable lives possible. She was ready to move to the next item when something small caught her attention. A tiny shine in the mirror, a shadow that did not fit the room's shape quite right. Maya zoomed in on the mirror's reflection, her heart beating faster. The computer enhancement showed what no one had noticed for more than 100 years. A man stood behind the camera, a black man, maybe in his 30 seconds. His face was partly visible as he leaned over the big old-fashioned camera. He looked very focused, his hands carefully adjusting the equipment with skill. "That's not possible," Maya said quietly to herself. In 1900 Charleston, black photographers were almost unknown in official records. The few who worked did so quietly, mostly for their own communities. Their names were rarely kept, and their pictures seldom got credit. Yet here was clear proof, caught by accident in a mirror, of a black artist trusted by one of Charleston's important white families to take their portrait. Maya leaned back in her chair, thoughts racing. Who was this man? How did he end up photographing the Whitmores? And what other hidden stories were waiting for someone to look carefully enough to find them? She picked up her phone. This find was only the start. The next morning, Maya went down to the museum's basement archive, surrounded by years of old papers, photos, and record books. The cool room buzzed with machines that kept the air dry to protect the fragile items. She had hardly slept, her mind full of the man in the mirror. She began with city directories from 1895 to 1905, sliding her finger down lists of names and jobs. The books separated people by race, as everything did back then, with black residents listed apart and often missing details. Under photographers, 3 white studios stood out clearly. In the section for colored people, no photographers appeared at all. "Of course not," Maya said under her breath, closing the book harder than she meant to. Her co-worker James came to the door holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've been here since 7, he said, giving her one. "What has you so caught up?" Maya turned her laptop so he could see the improved picture of the reflection. James looked closer, his eyes growing wide. "Is that who I think it is?" "A black photographer in 1900 working for the Whitmore family," Maya said. "I have to find out who he was." James sat down. The Whitmores kept very careful records. They gave their family papers to the university library long ago. "Have you looked there?" Maya shook her head. "That's where I'm going next." An hour later, she stood in the university library's special collections room wearing white cotton gloves. She gently turned pages in the Whitmore family account book. The writing was neat and proper. Lists of purchases, payments to workers, social visits. She found the date of the photo, April 15, 1900, and checked the lines around it. There it was. One simple entry for payment for portrait services. $3 to S. Crawford. Maya's heart beat quicker. S. Crawford, a name at last. She went to the library's family history database and searched for Samuel Crawford, Stephen Crawford, Simon Crawford. The results came slowly, most leading nowhere or to different people. Then, deep in the 1900 census records, she found him. Samuel Crawford, age 32, job listed as laborer, living on a street in a mostly black area. Laborer. The person filling out the census had not written down his real work. Maya took a photo of the page, her hands shaking a little. Samuel Crawford had been made invisible in his own time, his talent hidden behind an ordinary job title, but now she could see him clearly in that mirror reflection. She was determined to bring his story out into the open. The next morning, Maya drove through Charleston streets, following her GPS to the area once called the Cumming Street Corridor. The neighborhood looked very different after 124 years. Some old buildings had been turned into costly apartments, others still kept their worn but proud look from long ago. She parked in front of number 47, where Samuel Crawford had lived according to the census. The house was gone now, replaced by a small community garden. An older woman was working on tomato plants in one corner, moving slowly but with purpose. Maya walked over carefully. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm Dr. Robinson from the Charleston Heritage Museum. I'm doing research on the history of this street." The woman looked up, shading her eyes from the sun. "History? Then you found the right person. I'm Dorothy. My grandmother lived on this street her whole life and talked about it all the time." She pointed to a bench under a magnolia tree. "Come sit with me a minute. These old legs need a break." As they sat, Maya showed Dorothy the improved photo on her tablet. "I'm trying to learn about a man named Samuel Crawford. He was a photographer who lived here around 1900. Dorothy's face brightened with recognition. "Samuel Crawford. Goodness, I haven't heard that name in ages. My grandmother spoke of him, said he was the one who took pictures for folks when no one else would. White studios wouldn't serve black customers back then, you know." "Did she say anything more about him?" Dorothy thought for a moment. "She said he had a studio, but not on this street. Somewhere he had to keep quiet because white people didn't like black men running businesses they couldn't control. But folks knew. If you wanted your wedding or your baby's picture taken, you went to Samuel. Grandmother also said he was very talented, and even some white families hired him secretly because his pictures were better than anyone else's in Charleston." Maya felt a cool feeling run through her, even though the morning was warm. "Do you know what happened to him or where his studio was?" "That part I don't know, but my cousin Robert might. He's been working on our family history for years, keeping boxes of old papers and pictures at his house." Dorothy took out her phone easily. "Let me call him." 20 minutes later, Maya was driving across town to meet Robert, following Dorothy's careful directions written on paper. The search was growing, one person leading to the next, each talk uncovering another piece of history that had been carefully hidden. Robert's house was in a quiet neighborhood north of downtown, a neat bungalow with a porch swing and trimmed bushes. He opened the door before she could knock, a tall man in his 60s with warm eyes and the excited look of someone who loved history. "Dorothy called me," he said, inviting her in. "I've been getting out everything I have on the Cumming Street area. This is thrilling. No one has ever asked about Samuel Crawford before." He took her to his basement, turned into a personal collection room. Plastic boxes lined the walls, each marked with family names and years. A big table in the middle was already covered with photos, letters, and papers. "I've been gathering family stories for 30 years, Robert explained, pulling out a chair for Maya. "Most black families in Charleston lost their records. Fires, floods, people moving away during hard times, but some things lasted." He opened one box and gently placed several photographs on the table. Maya caught her breath. Unlike the stiff Whitmore family portrait, these showed regular black life in Charleston around 1900, a woman in her best dress standing proudly by a church, children playing in a yard, a man in work clothes holding his tools, a young couple on their wedding day. Each photo was on thick card with an embossed mark in the corner, S. Crawford Photography. "My goodness," Maya said softly, leaning in. "These are his pictures." Robert nodded. "My great-great-grandmother is in this wedding one," he said, pointing. "She got married in 1902. Family stories say Samuel was the only photographer who took time to make everything just right. He'd position people, fix the light, talk to them, until they felt comfortable. Most white photographers treated black customers badly, but Samuel made everyone feel important." Maya studied each photo closely. The quality was amazing. Sharp details, careful arrangement, perfect light. These were not quick, plain pictures. Each one showed real feeling, pride, and humanity. "There's more," Robert said quietly. He brought out an old leather-bound book. The pages were yellow, but still good. "I bought this at an estate sale 5 years ago. I believe it was Samuel's." Maya opened the ledger carefully. Page after page listed dates, client names, prices, and short notes. The records went from 1897 to 1903. She saw names she recognized from Charleston's black community: teachers, preachers, shop owners. but mixed in were other entries in different ink, almost like a code. W. Family, April 15th, 1900. $3. Discretion needed. He was taking pictures for white families too, Maya said, almost not believing it. Maya came back to Robert's house 3 days later with special tools for handling old items. She had spent every spare hour studying Samuel's ledger, matching names with city records and family stories. The pattern was plain. Samuel ran 2 different kinds of work, one open for Charleston's black community, another secret for white clients who wanted his better skills but demanded complete privacy. "I think I found where his studio was," Maya told Robert, spreading out a 1900 map of Charleston on his table. She pointed to a small alley behind King Street. "This building here. The ledger mentions rear entrance and King Street spot several times. I checked old property records. In 1898, a black carpenter named Thomas Wright owned it. I believe Samuel rented space from him." Robert looked at the map. "That building is still there. It's a small shop now, but the old structure remains. Want to go see it?" An hour later, they stood in the alley behind a nicely fixed-up store. The current owner, a nice woman named Lisa, had said they could look around after Maya explained her work. "The upstairs hasn't been changed yet," Lisa said, opening a door to a steep staircase. "The last owner used it for storage. I've been planning to turn it into offices." The stairs groaned as they climbed. At the top, Lisa opened another door, and they stepped into a long, narrow room with high ceilings and windows facing north. Perfect, steady light for taking portraits. The space held years of junk, broken chairs, old boxes, dusty things. Maya's experienced eye went straight to the windows. North light, just right for photography. Robert checked the walls. "Look here," he said, pointing to marks on the wooden floor, dents where heavy stands had stood long ago. "These might be from camera tripods." They spent the next 2 hours carefully shifting boxes and old furniture, looking for any sign Samuel had been there. Maya was taking pictures of the window frames when Robert called, "Maya, come look at this." He was on his knees by a loose floorboard he had lifted. Under it was an empty space, and inside sat a rusty metal box covered in dust. With careful hands, Maya lifted it out. It was locked, but the lock was old and weak. Robert got tools from Lisa downstairs, and together they gently opened it. Inside were glass plate negatives, dozens of them, each wrapped neatly in cloth. Maya held one up to the window light, and her heart almost stopped. It was a beautiful portrait of a black family, every detail clear and perfect. Samuel's special style. "There must be 50 plates here," Robert said in wonder. He hid his negatives. Maya stayed late that night in the museum's careful preservation room, slowly unwrapping and recording each glass plate negative Samuel had hidden. Each picture told its own story. Families in their best clothes, children with serious looks holding still for the long exposure. Time. Older men and women whose faces carried memories of Avery and freedom, young couples starting their lives. But the last plates in the box made Maya stop breathing for a second. These showed white families, the Whitmores and other well-known Charleston names from history books. Each negative had a small number scratched in the corner that matched the secret notes in Samuel's ledger. She was recording the 5th white family portrait when her phone rang. It was Robert. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I kept thinking why Samuel hid those plates. Why not leave them in his studio?" Maya had been asking herself the same thing. "I think he was keeping them safe, and maybe keeping himself safe too. If anyone found he kept copies of the white family portraits, proof that they needed his talent, it could have ruined him." Robert spoke softly. A black man holding evidence of his skill, showing white people depended on him. That was risky back then. Maya looked at the negatives spread out. He had recorded everything, an archive of black Charleston life that would have been lost otherwise. But he also kept proof of his own great ability, hidden where no one could destroy it. The next morning, Maya started contacting descendants of the families in the pictures. She began with the black community, posting on local history groups and reaching out to old churches. The replies came fast. In a few days, her office filled with people bringing their own family photos, many carrying Samuel's embossed mark. Each person added more to the story. Samuel had taught himself photography through practice. He saved money from dock work to buy his first camera. People remembered his patience and his talent for seeing beauty. He never married, giving all his time to his work. An older man named Mr. Thomas brought something special, a letter his grandmother had saved, written by Samuel in 1902. Maya read it out loud, her voice shaking a little. "Dear Mrs. Thomas, I hope this portrait gives you joy. When I look through my camera, I see not just faces, but souls. I see strength, grace, and dignity the world tries to hide. Every picture I make is my way of saying, you existed, you mattered, you were beautiful. They may not put our names in their history books, but I will capture our light, and one day someone will see." Maya knew the next part would be careful. She had collected Samuel's work for Charleston's black community. The white families would be harder. She needed to approach them gently, knowing that admitting a black photographer's better skill would change the stories many families told about their past. She started with the Whitmores. The current family head, Richard Whitmore, was a retired lawyer known for helping preserve old buildings. Maya called his office and explained her research, focusing on the historical importance. They met at his downtown law office, walls covered with family portraits across many years. Richard was in his 72nd, dressed perfectly with the polite manners of old Charleston. "Dr. Robinson," he said, shaking her hand, "you've made me curious. We've had that portrait for generations, but I don't think we've ever looked at it closely." Maya showed him the improved image on her tablet, zooming to the mirror reflection. Richard leaned in, fixing his glasses. "A black photographer," he said slowly, "in 1900 taking my great-great-grandparents' picture. He stayed E.T. for a long moment. That's not a story I heard growing up." "Your family paid him $3, Maya said, showing the ledger note. "That was a lot of money then. They chose him on purpose." Richard leaned back. "My great-great-grandfather was very particular. Family tales say he let 3 photographers go before finding one good enough for that portrait." He looked at the picture again. "I guess he found the right one, even if he couldn't say so openly." "Would you allow us to display this?" Maya asked, "to give Samuel Crawford the credit he deserves?" Richard was silent for a while. Maya could see the struggle inside him, years of family pride meeting historical fact. At last he spoke. "My grandson is biracial. He's 12 and has been asking hard questions about our family history, about race and advantage. I've been trying to figure out how to answer him truthfully." He looked straight at Maya. "Yes, display it. Tell Samuel Crawford's story. My family gained from his talent while refusing to name him. That's a truth we should face." Over the next weeks, Maya reached out to 6 other families whose portraits were in Samuel's hidden collection. The answers were different. 2 families said no, one hung up angrily, but 3 others, like Richard, agreed to tell the truth. One woman, whose family had been clients, cried when she saw Samuel's reflection. "All my life I heard we built everything ourselves," she said. "But we didn't, did we? We built it on the backs and gifts of people we wouldn't name." 8 weeks later, Maya stood in the museum's main gallery, watching the last preparations for the exhibition. The walls were painted soft gray, and good lights showed the photos arranged in time order around the room. In the middle hung the Whitmore family portrait, made large to show both the main picture and the clear mirror reflection of Samuel working. Above the entrance, in nice letters, the title read, "Samuel Crawford, the photographer hidden in plain sight." James helped her place the last display case, which held Samuel's ledger, pieces of camera equipment Robert had helped find from different places, and some of his glass plate negatives. Every photo in the show came with stories Maya had gathered, not just names and dates, but memories and meanings behind the pictures. One side of the gallery showed Samuel's open work for the black community. Families in their best clothes, children with serious faces, older people whose eyes held long lives of struggle and freedom. Each picture showed pride and real humanity. The other side showed what Maya called the secret commissions, the portraits of white families, each with the original photo and proof of Samuel's part. Panels explained the strange situation, trusted for his better skill, but forced to stay unseen, paid for his art, but refused public credit. Dorothy came early, bringing her whole family. She stood at the entrance with tears on her face. "My grandmother would be so proud. She always said Samuel deserved to be known." Robert brought more relatives and friends from the Cumming Street area. They walked through slowly, pointing out faces they knew from their own albums, reading Samuel's words, seeing their own history shown clearly. When Richard Whitmore arrived with his family, there was a short moment of unease. 2 groups that had lived in separate paths T's now standing in the same room. But Richard went straight to Dorothy and held out his hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "for keeping these stories safe, for making sure the truth could come out." Dorothy took his hand. "Thank you for being brave enough to accept it." Richard's grandson stood in front of the big Whitmore portrait, staring at Samuel's reflection in the mirror. "He was really good," the boy said plainly. "Better than photographers today." Maya smiled. That simple comment, without the heavy weight of history or bias, was maybe the clearest praise of Samuel's talent. As the doors opened to the public, Maya felt months of hard work lift from her shoulders. She had given Samuel Crawford what life had taken from him: recognition, credit, and his true place in Charleston's past. The exhibition drew huge crowds. Local news covered the opening, and the story spread to national papers. Headlines said things like "Forgotten photographer's skill revealed after 124 years and mirror reflection uncovers hidden black artistry in Jim Crow South." Maya did interview after interview, always turning attention back to Samuel, his skill, his bravery, his choice to create beauty and protect dignity in a time that tried to take both away. The museum's visitors tripled. People traveled from far away, some bringing their own family photos to match with Samuel's work. The show touched something deep in Charleston, an understanding that history was more mixed, more connected, and more difficult than the clean stories told before. Robert became like an extra guide, spending days at the museum sharing the stories he knew. He stood by photos of his own family, telling visitors about the grandmother who spoke of Samuel, about the community that backed him, about the quiet trust and hidden ways that let a black artist work despite the rules of his time. But not everyone was happy. Maya got angry messages saying she was changing history, hurting Charleston's image, making white families look wrong. One local writer posted a harsh article called "Enough with the Guilt Trip," claiming Samuel had been treated fairly for his era, and that modern people were forcing today's ideas onto the past. Maya answered these views in a public talk at the museum. "This isn't about guilt," she told the full room. "It's about truth. It's about seeing the complete picture, not only the comfortable parts." Samuel Crawford was outstanding at his work. White families knew it. They paid him and trusted him with their most important pictures, but they could not admit it openly because of the racial rules then. Both facts are real, both matter. She paused, looking at the mixed crowd. When we hide these stories, when we act like the past was simple, we lose something important. We lose the truth about human strength, about talent that survived despite walls, about how people really lived. Samuel should be remembered not just as a symbol, but as an artist whose pictures speak clearly for themselves. The applause was loud and long. Scholars started coming to study Samuel's photographs, seeing their value beyond how they were made. His technique, his arrangement, his way of catching true feeling marked him as a master of early photography. People compared him to others like James Van der Zee and the black photographers who came later in the Harlem Renaissance, even though Samuel worked earlier and under much harder limits. 6 months after the exhibition opened, Maya stood in the gallery again, but for a new reason. The museum had bought the building where Samuel's studio once was, and they were announcing plans to fix it up as a working photography space and learning center focused on recording underrepresented groups in the South. The Samuel Crawford Center for Visual History would give free photography classes, keep community pictures safe, and help new photographers from overlooked backgrounds. It would be everything Samuel's studio had been, a place where people could be seen, recorded, and valued without needing secrecy or fear. Dorothy cut the ribbon, her hands steady even at her age. "Samuel would have loved this," she said, "so everyone could hear. Not just because it honors him, though I think he'd be glad, but because it keeps going what he began, making sure people are seen, making sure they matter." The week before, Maya had received a surprise package from a family in Philadelphia. Inside was another glass plate negative found in an old attic, a picture of Samuel himself, the only known photo of the photographer. He stood in his studio, one hand on his camera, his face serious but with a quiet pride in his eyes. He looked younger than Maya had pictured, maybe in his late 20s, already a true expert. That photograph now had the best spot in the exhibition. Samuel Crawford, at last visible, at last given credit, at last home. As Maya locked the museum that evening, She thought about the small chain of events that led to this. A mirror placed just right. A family choosing to give away an old photo. Her own wish to look closer. One tiny reflection had opened a door to a whole hidden world. She thought of Samuel in that upstairs studio, preparing his plates with care, fixing his camera, speaking gently to his subjects until they felt at ease. She thought of him hiding those negatives, building an archive he might never see honored, but doing it anyway because the work itself was important. History had tried to make Samuel Crawford disappear, to turn him into just laborer in a census line, to wipe his name from the art he created. But he had left signs, a reflection in a mirror, carefully saved negatives, a detailed ledger. He had believed that one day someone would look and see. Maya switched off the gallery lights, leaving only gentle light on the photographs. In the quiet dark, Samuel's work shone, faces from over a century ago, caught with such skill and heart that they almost seemed alive. All those people he photographed, given dignity and lasting memory through his art. They had existed, they had mattered, they had been beautiful. And now, at last, the world could see.